In this video, we're going to cover how to build your own custom user interface in Grid Studio for control and monitoring purposes. All of the visual design for your user interface happens right here in the Artboard. Grid Studio also provides a set of default widgets to get you up and running quickly. If you don't see them on your machine yet, you can go under Library, under Extensions, under Online, and look for the Grid Original Widget Pack. Right-click on it, and you can then install this globally for your entire machine. Once that is done, they will be available here when you click on this icon here. But before we get started, the first thing that you need to do is, of course, to create an Artboard object into your project. I've already done this, and all you need to do that is click on the plus icon here, and you get access to the Artboard, or right-click and do that as well. And you can also actually have multiple artboards. So you can create a second artboard. And the reason for that is maybe you have one for control. So let's say I have the artboard for control. And I have another one for monitoring purposes. And you can very quickly jump between these two by selecting them, and the artboard view will actually jump dynamically depending on what is selected. You can also come in here and actually switch very quickly between the available artboards in your projects. Another way to have access to that is you can come in here and actually also switch between them as well. Sometimes when you're working with the artboard, you might want to also lock the view just so that as you're clicking around and you did not accidentally click on a different artboard and then switch to a different one, and then now you're adding things into the wrong view. So it might be helpful to just lock that if that is needed for your purposes. Okay, now that we have an artboard, let's do something very basic in terms of just trying to monitor what is going on and have a view of some parameters of different objects. So for example, I have a tracker object here. One of the ways to have direct access and monitor some values of a specific property is you can directly click and drag it from the inspector and let go. And most of the time, you have access to some of these pre-built widgets already. And the same thing is I can then also do that for the scale value. And depending on the type of property it is, you would actually have different available widgets available. So for this scale, let's try to use the basic number field. Cool. Now that we have a few different widgets placed in the artboard, you can directly interact with it by switching it into play mode. So now let's also select the tracker so that we can see the values in the inspector. And by enabling it into the play mode, you can then see I can actually adjust the value directly here. And those values are then updated into the inspector. And likewise, if I am adjusting the value in the inspector as well, those values will be represented from the widget as well. So this is a nice way that you can get started and get playing around. And just to switch between the two different modes, you have the edit mode that we're in currently right now, where we're placing different widgets, and you can move these widgets around. And you can switch into the play mode by clicking on this icon up at the top. There is also a keyboard shortcut key, which is the letter V. So by toggling or hitting the V on your keyboard, you're actually toggling between the two modes for the artboard. Now, different objects also have some pre-built widgets built in within themselves as well. So for example, here I have the add a link KVM switcher. I can drag that out and directly have access to some of these pre-built widgets. So I can, for example, select that, and I get a nice pre-built one that is showing me, for example, the status of the USB connection, whether I'm getting video and audio on the add a link objects. You can also right-click on that, and also you can see there are some pre-built widgets when they're available. You can then also just directly click into that one and actually see it or directly use it in this view. One interesting note is that these widgets, you can actually remove them and actually dock it in a specific location for quick access, for example. So if you always want to have this just docked somewhere else, you can just dock that widget directly into here as well. Another thing that you can do is you can use some of the existing widgets and actually do some basic triggerings as well. So for example, we have some pre-built widgets like a push button. And let's say I want to very quickly use this push button and send a OSC command. So I can directly drag the OSC objects out from the tree, and depending on which event that I want to have access to, and in most cases for a push button, most likely you want to have the trigger, and you can then see I want to choose, let's say I want to send a trigger action, and that would link that to the push button. When the push button is triggered, I would actually be controlling that and sending that OSC trigger, as you can see in this workflow. So all of these logic is done through workflows. You can see that already being done there. And let's say I want to also link the VLC player and also link to the trigger and also trigger, let's say I want to stop the VLC player as well. So you can see a node is already added into the workflow directly for you. This is a nice quick action that we can link directly for you. And for example, even the OSC, you might want to actually define the path for the OSC message that you want to send out to. So if we then quickly switch to the play mode, then by clicking on the push button, you can see that those actions are actually triggered when this push button is being pressed. Another thing that you might want to do, let's say, let's create a slider, and we do, let's do a fader, right? That might be something a little bit more relevant. So I have a fader, and let's say I want to do on value change of the fader. I want to then control the volume. So I can adjust the volume of the VLC player. And one thing to note with the workflow is that you would actually want to grab, for example, the value of this fader and actually import it into the adjust volume action. By default, it is just set to a specific value, but with the workflow, you're actually grabbing the information from this slider from the data stream. For example, here we have the parameter value, or I can just directly have access to here, and I just want to link it to the parameter value. So then now this fader is then actually directly controlling the VLC player volume when the VLC connection is correct and it's working. So that is how you can very quickly get started using some default widgets that we provide. Of course, sometimes that is not the style that you want, and you want to maybe just make some minor adjustments to how they look. The default widgets that we provide, they all are linked to a default style. When you then first create a button or any of those widgets, the default style objects will also be automatically created into your project tree. And from there, you then have access to globally of all of these linked widgets. So for example, I don't like the color of the label on all of these widgets. I can come in here and set it to a light red, for example. So any of these widgets that are linked to this default style objects, then they would pick up that change in here. And you can then create another toggle button, let's say, and that will also pick up from the same style objects that is defining the label color there as well. So that is how you can make use of the default style, and then actually you can then just directly come in and make changes to that style guide, and that is how those widgets are linked. And just so that you are talking about how exactly that works, all of these widgets, as you can see, under data source, there is a style object that is linked. And you can then also switch to a different style. If you don't like to use this style, you can easily just duplicate this style and link to the different style that you have created as well. Sometimes you can see, for example, talk about the data source. You can see there are some exposed properties of a widget that you can directly make changes to. So for example, this push button has a label and it says push button by default. And so I can then say this is the OSC trigger OSC or OSC plus VLC, just so that I know when I press on this button here, I know what that button is doing, for example. So that is a nice way that some of these pre-built widgets already provide you with. You can see that there's also the option to have a image here as well. So what you can do is under library, under some of the icons that are available to you, I believe we had the VLC trying to do a stop. So what I can do is then search for a stop icon, drag that out and into the widget, and then I can then apply it into the image. And then now I can already very quickly apply an image into this button. So that is another way to just customize how that button looks like based on some of the pre-built definitions and behavior of the widget that we ship. If some of these widgets are not to your liking and you want to adjust them, you're feel free to right-click on any of them and open the editor. And in fact, this is how we actually pre-built some of these widgets for you guys as well. So we use the editor of this functionality, and you can come in here and actually dissect how we actually create some of these widgets. They're made of these different building blocks. For example, we've got the label, we've got a background to define the background color, and we've also can see there is a button to receive the trigger of the interaction of you pressing on this button, for example. You feel free to come in and make small adjustments to these things, move them around to your liking, and create your own widget if you like. In this video, we're not going to talk too much about how that works. But it's just a nice way to very quickly explain to you guys how it all works. At the end, you come into this editor mode, and you probably need to create some different data source just to pass information from the overall system into this widget, and so that the widget can then make use of that information. For example, we can link to that default style object. This is how we can then grab information from another object and be used inside this widget, for example. Another widget that I want to very quickly point you to is that we have a status object. So for example, here, this is just a blank widget that we're expecting you to link to a object. And for example, I can then link this to a tracker. And then now this widget is then representing the status of this tracker. So if I come into the tracker and I just enable or disable the map inputs, you can then see the status is then represented. And this is how you can potentially start building out a little mini dashboard of the different status just for monitoring purposes. So you can duplicate these widgets. And then, for example, now I want to link this one to add a link, for example, and I just create another one for VLC. Let's say I can drag the VLC into here, and then now these are linked to that object. And depending on the connection status, so if I then start up a VLC, you can then will see that that goes green and then have the appropriate message if all of the settings are defined correctly.